Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a book that poses a really radical question. What if God wasn't a being you worship, but actually a scientific formula you could understand?
Yep, that's the central idea in the book we're exploring today, Bhagwan, by author Nayak. It's a pretty startling way to look at history and spirituality, and it all kicks off by decoding a single ancient word.
So the author's big argument is that for thousands of years, the word Bhagwan has been completely misunderstood. He says it's not a name at all, but a hidden scientific code.
And according to Nayak, this isn't some matter of faith or belief. He argues it's a tangible scientific reality, a reality based on the 5 natural elements that literally create and sustain all life.
The book breaks this code down into 5 core parts of nature, and the author argues that these 5 things are the true, tangible meaning of Bhagwan. So let's go through them one by one.
First up, the letter B. It stands for Bhumi, or Earth. Nayak connects this directly to our own bodies, pointing out that the essential minerals that come from the soil make up about 4% of a human being. It's our foundation. Next is G for Gagan, or the cosmos. Now this is where the author makes a pretty interesting jump. He links the vast emptiness of space to our consciousness itself, drawing a parallel to a wild fact from quantum physics, that 99.99% of any atom is actually empty space.
Third, we've got A for Agni, which means fire. But hold on, we're not talking about a campfire here. The book defines this as our internal metabolic energy. You know, that constant 37 degrees Celsius temperature that is, quite literally, the difference between being alive and, well, not. The fourth element is Vayu, or air. In this framework, this is the essential prana, the life force. It's the oxygen that fuels every single one of our cells, the thing that allows for all movement in life. You can't live without it for more than a few minutes.
And finally, N stands for near, or water. It makes up about 70% of our bodies and is the medium where every single biochemical process happens. So here's the crucial point the author is making. Bhagwan isn't a god to pray to, but a scientific recipe for life itself, the very real, tangible mix of these 5 natural forces.
Okay, so once you start seeing Bhagwan in this scientific way, the author then uses that idea to frame this massive historical conflict between 2 totally different kinds of societies.
On one side, you've got what he calls the Protector Society, or Rakshak. Think of them as an indigenous agrarian culture, the producers. And against them, he describes a predator syndicate, which he says has a Eurasian tribal mindset that's all about being parasitic and exploitative.
This all ties into what the book calls the Nandi philosophy. The idea here is that the key to the Protector Society's strength and independence was protecting their livestock and their soil. The author argues that animals like bulls and cows weren't just sacred, they were scientific tools for farming that guaranteed a self-sufficient economy.
And the author tries to put a modern price tag on this predator mindset. He claims it's what fuels today's global system of exploitation, everything from industrial agriculture to resource mining, and values it at over $2 trillion. He's basically saying that ancient conflict is still happening today, just in a different form.
The book goes on to argue that this syndicate has actually shown up in 3 major historical forms, but with the same alleged goal, to enslave the Protector Society.
So, according to the author, these aren't just separate chapters in a history book. They're more like 3 different masks worn by the same predator force. First was what he calls Manuvari, which he says created mental slavery through a rigid social structure. Then came the Mughals, who allegedly brought economic slavery with taxes and looting. And finally, the British, who used their colonial laws to create a kind of legal slavery.
So the author uses this idea to argue that all the historical fights we read about, the ones framed around temples, mosques, and churches, are really just a distraction. For Nayak, the only real battle has always been between this native protector society and a foreign predator force.
So, in response to what he describes as a centuries-long conflict, the book itself is framed as a kind of modern-day uprising. But this one isn't fought with swords or guns. It's fought with information.
Nayak frames the book as the opening shot in this modern intellectual battle. He says the whole thing is the result of an 18-year intellectual exile and a deep-dive research project.
All that research ended up in a massive 1,000-page document. The author doesn't just call it a book.
He calls it a scientific shield for the protector society, designed to tear down what he calls the historical lies of the Syndicate.
And get this, the entire body of work, all that data, comes out to 2 gigabytes. It's positioned as the main weapon for a 21st century digital revolution. The argument here is that the modern fight for freedom won't be won on a physical battlefield, but with information and knowledge.
So in the end, the book leaves us with this really provocative question. Can reclaiming the scientific meaning of just one single word actually be the key to liberating an entire society? That's the core question sitting at the heart of this whole thing.